All right, let's try this one more time. So, as I was saying before I ended and deleted my stream, so you'll never know, I've haven't gone live in a while. I'm also perplexed on ideas to talk about. So I thought I would just have a live open chat, unscheduled, random, see who pops in and see who wants to have a conversation. Uh, one of the one of the things that I'm trying to do with my channel is share resources, but I'm trying to find a balance between sharing my opinion and resources for you to develop your own opinion and throwing in my opinion for what I consider to be, I don't know, I guess criticism of other paths. So one of the things that I'm finding is there's a lot of regurgitation and hearsay that folks do when you talk about spiritual revival reconstruction. Now, a lot of the stuff that I had done, and I know I'll eventually give a tour of my library. I said I would do it before. I just need to dust it off, make it look a little more presentable, just because I don't always pull my books out every day, and because I have a lot of stuff in front of my bookcase, I have a tendency to not really clean it off in great detail on a regular basis. So I need to do some dusting, a little house cleaning before I go showing those books off. A lot of the books that I have are like Llewellyn publication books, which nothing wrong with Llewellyn. However, a lot of the authors that have been published through Llewellyn, I've come to find share their opinion without necessarily backing up factual sources. When you don't back up factual sources, it becomes difficult to justify using that in your own personal path. I think at the end of the day, everyone is kind of doing their own personal path. You're developing it as you go along. I remember when I was talking to my mom a couple of years, like many years ago, probably like late 90s, I was talking to my mom about how I want to start pursuing and looking at some of these spiritual paths. And I think she said to me, "Oh, you mean that religion you make up as you go along?" Now, at the time, being young and naive as I was very offended by this phrase, this turn of phrase, this statement that she said to me. And now, I kind of think she hit the nail on the head. I just didn't see it at the time. And it's interesting because young folks have a tendency to feel like they have all the answers, like they know everything. And that's just not the case. None of us know everything. In fact, most of the things that we know is taught to us. That's not to say individuals can't come up with their own mind or their own theories, their own mind on things, or their own theories on how things work and operate. But I've noticed there's a tendency for folks to kind of regurgitate what they've read because we're taught how to think. We're taught the base of existence from others. And then we learn on our own through trial and error, and we kind of develop our own opinion, meshing together what we were told and what we've experienced. It seems like when we're told stuff, we have it so deeply ingrained in our belief system that we don't question it. And I think this is true for any religion or spirituality out there. So when folks write down information in a book, we take it like, oh, it was written down, it has to be right. But we never stop and pause to say, where did this come from? One of my most recent readings, I'm browsing through a book right now, which is, I have it up here. I have a PDF of it because it's an old book and it's hard to get a hold of. But I found it very interesting, and I posted this course in my community section. My chat should be working if you would like to participate. By the way, feel free to ask questions as you're popping into the chat. This is an open discussion. It doesn't need to be directed in one way. Right now, I'm just rambling. But let's see here. Let's go to my backup files and books. There we go. So in this particular PDF, it is called Initiation into Hermetics, of a Course of Instruction of Magic Theory and Practice by Franz Barden. Now, this book was published, I think the original, let's see, so the copyright's from 1971, but the first edition was 1956. So I guess it's from the 50s, which I'm finding to be the case with most of the books. Now that I'm starting to question a lot of what I've read and been taught, I'm asking myself, well, where did this come from and who invented it and why is it accurate? I mean, I could spout off a whole bunch of stuff that I've learned throughout the years from this book or that book or hearsay or people telling me. But now I want to go and I want to find, well, where did that come from? What makes it accurate or authentic? I want to do a video specifically on this because I find it very interesting. Now, one of the things that I find most interesting about this book from the 50s is he starts out by talking about God. And we are talking about the Judeo-Christian God here, specifically referring to him as Yahweh. Now, I might be mispronouncing that name. I don't follow that practice, but it's the 4 letters YHVH. And it looks like he says Yahweh. I've always heard it pronounced Yahweh, or eventually, apparently, there are different ways of saying it, like Jehovah. And he lists this out in the beginning of his introduction. Then he goes into the theory of the elements, and he breaks down. Now, here's the thing. A lot of people who have practiced spirituality that has to do with, I don't know if my chat, oh, that's top chat. Let me hit live chat. Maybe that's why. Maybe live chat wasn't, okay. So I might not have seen your comments. So again, feel free to comment. So a lot of folks will talk about the 5 elements. Now the 5 elements will vary depending on what tradition and culture you go with. Like for example, in China, you have earth, air, water. I'm sorry, you have, earth, air, fire, water, wood. Wait a minute, metal's one of them too. Maybe they don't consider it. Talk about the Wuxing. They definitely have earth, they have metal, they have wood, water, and fire. There's no air in Chinese 5 elements. Yeah, because they have the cycle of creation and the cycle of destruction, which interestingly enough, that if you put that out, it actually makes a star, a pentagram, if you will. And now in Japanese, their 5 elements are a little bit different. They have the void, and then they have wind, which is close to air. So you have wind, the void, gold, I think. And I think you again have water and fire. I have to look these up. I used to have them all memorized, but then I had to think about them for a little bit. Like with the Wuxing, with the Chinese 5 elements, there's a cycle where they create each other, and then there's a cycle where they destroy each other. Basically, like water is created from metal because water will condense on metal and create droplets, and then water will create wood because trees will grow out of the earth. Then wood will create fire because you have to burn it to create fire. Fire creates metal. And then you have your cycle of destruction because metal chops wood. So metal would destroy wood. Wood destroys earth because the roots will uproot the soil. Oh, no, that's right. Fire creates earth because ashes. And then earth creates metal because of ore. Sorry, I didn't finish the cycle of creation. But metal destroys wood. Wood is destroyed by fire. No fire. Wood gives fire life. Wood destroys earth because it uproots it. And then earth destroys fire because it smothers it. And then it's water that destroys metal because it rusts it, I think. Like I said, I don't have the whole thing memorized, but it's interesting to think about how the different cultures look at these elements. Now, most people will say earth, air, fire, water, and spirit, or some people will use the word akasha. When I was younger, I saw a lot of books referring to the 5th element, the spirit element, as akasha, and I always thought that was fascinating. Like, what is akasha? So akasha apparently is an Indian name for the ether. And oops, as I bumped my wrist into the table. And I remember reading different things, like you have different fingers associated with each of the elements. Like I think your thumb was supposed to be water. Your pointer finger was fire. Your middle finger was the spirit akasha one that we're talking about. Your ring finger is earth. And your pinky is air, if I remember correctly. They're supposed to be a finger association. This came for, I believe it's in a Grimoire Shadows by Ed Fitch. I think that's where I originally learned it. But then there's also associations with elemental triangles. So you have like 4 different triangles, 2 of them facing upward, and there's a line through the bottom base of the triangle. And I believe the 2 that are facing up, one is for air and one is for fire. They're the masculine elements. And then the arrow is pointing down as earth and water. And if I remember correctly, I believe water's the one with the line through it, because it's like water in a cone cup, basically. And then the other one's like an arrow pointing down at the earth. And the two pointing up, I want to say fire is the one with the line because it's burning off of a fuel source. And then the plain arrow is pointing up at the air. So it's literally just a triangle. And you have those 4 elemental triangles. Now here's the thing. With those finger things, like which element is represented by which finger, and they'll actually say, I think in a Grimoire of Shadows, because you can use the 2 fingers together, fire and ether or spirit or akasha, to cast your circles, which is similar to using a wand because you're putting spirit and flame, and you're supposed to visualize a flame as you're casting your circle. But casting your circle, the elemental associations, the elemental triangles, the elements associated with the fingers, all of that stuff, where did it come from? So again, I don't do a lot of videos just regurgitating that stuff anymore, because it's like, what's the point? If I can't authenticate where it came from, you could literally have some random person jot down a whole bunch of stuff in a book, share it with folks, or make a random video, and no one's going to know where it actually came from, and we don't know if it's authentic or if it's just some random person that just made up this, you know, just random thoughts and just shared them. I mean, you can invent something right now. Technically, you can take something like the Harry Potter series, and you could say, oh, this is how wands are used, and these are the spells that you use. So when you want to seek something out, you're going to cast the spell Revelio, which, by the way, is from Hogwarts Legacy. You use that spell a lot in the game. My point is, it's something that somebody came up with and invented. So what makes Harry Potter not authentic, but someone else coming up with something back in the 50s, or, you know, the early 1900s, or even the late 1800s, why is what them coming up with more authentic? So if you can't trace it back to its source, and you can't bring the source out for others to read it and reference it, to question it, then I feel like you're doing a disservice to yourself and to people that you're trying to share that information with. And that's my biggest problem with a lot of the Llewellyn books, is because of that. So I'm looking through this introduction to Hermetics, this theory and practice, and on one of the pages they talk about the elements, and it specifically says in here, according to the Indian succession of the Tattwas, it runs as follows. I might be mispronouncing that name. It's Tattwas. It says Akasha, principle of the aether. Tedja, principle of the fire. Waju, principle of the air. Apis, principle of the water. And Prithvi, principle of the earth. So you literally have the 5 elements that are traditionally used in a lot of the modern practices that most people call witchcraft. So are they, in fact, Indian practices? Do they come from Hinduism? Is this stuff practiced in Hinduism? Now, I haven't really studied Hinduism, so I can't answer that myself, but it makes me wonder. And this is why I was thinking of doing a deep dive on this and a video on this, because I've heard that reference before, that a lot of the stuff that people do in ritualistic ceremonial magic today actually comes from other traditions. And that's a frustration and a struggle that I've had. I've complained about... Let me turn off my fan. I don't know if it's picking up on the mic, but it's actually getting comfortable, so I don't need it on. Oof. That was one of the complaints that I do in some of my videos about Wicca. There's nothing wrong with Wicca. You know, it's just a lot of the people that I speak with that are Wiccans have a tendency to claim other traditions as their own, and this feels like one of those traditions that's being claimed. If this comes from Hinduism or something else in India, then why aren't we acknowledging that's where it came from? And it's fine to adapt things, but acknowledge where it comes from. We got a comment here from Brent, I apologize. Shadow implementation fun happens as they float to create releasing. What's that from? Shadow implementation fun happens as they float to create releasing. Yeah, I'm not sure what the reference is to. Feel free to add more context. But yeah, that's what I've been kind of deep diving into. These appear around evocation areas. Shadow implementation fun happens. So you're saying like shadow manifestations happen around areas where people try to do evocation? Just pausing for a moment so you can have a chance to respond. That is correct. Ah. Does that come from your own personal practice, or is that something that was shared to you from a different source? Out of curiosity. Curious if it comes from a specific path, or maybe it's directly related to what I'm talking about with the 5 elements. Maybe it's not, which is fine. We can jump topics. I have no problem jumping topics. I invoke bifrons regularly. Not familiar with bifrons, actually. Now, you did mention 2 different things, though. You said evocation, but then you said invoke. And this could be, again, it could be a difference of the way folks use terms, but as I've always understood it, evocation would be projecting or drawing something not inside of you, but in your vicinity or area. Actually, technically, you can evoke from a very far distance as well, but invocation is where you're drawing something inside of you. So, for example, one way of thinking about it, the way I understand it would be to invoke would be if you are meditating and drawing in awareness and awakening, you might invoke awareness to you. You might work with elemental magic potentially. And for example, air tends to be associated with knowledge and wisdom. Again, this is coming from those books. I don't know where the source or origin of that is, but you might invoke the element of air, for example. Yeah, bifrons I would actually have to look up because I've never heard of those before. That doesn't mean they don't exist, just means I haven't run across them in my personal research. Let's see. Demons. Okay. That's at least what Wikipedia says. So you specifically invoke demons regularly? How come? I mean, I'm not criticizing people for doing their paths, but reading here. Yeah, I don't even know. And that's the other thing, too. When you randomly look things up online, not knowing where the source is from, people have a tendency to write things online, too. The Earl Bifron, monstrous appearance. Yeah, there's a lot of references to them. I don't work with demons at all, never have. Invoke is guidance within, but this calms the environment. Interesting. Yeah, I don't know if I have anything to add because, like I said, myself, I don't work with demons at all. As far as I know from the little bit that I've heard from other cultures speaking about stuff. Now, but again, it's like I don't know where Bifron comes from, and I don't know if that's specifically, like I don't know what tradition that comes from. Let's see. According to this is a description in the Lesser Key of Solomon. Okay, so this... Yeah. So I guess tell me more. Like, I don't know what tradition this comes from. I don't know what practice this comes from. I don't even know if bifrons is the way you would translate it, or another word for it would be demons. Now, a lot of these are saying that it's a form of demon, but I don't know. I don't know anything about them. Like I said, I've never worked with them before myself. And one reference here mentioned the Lesser Key of Solomon, which is actually a fairly old and very popular book. This is referring to graves and death magic. Gotcha. Yeah, I don't work with graves or death magic myself. And I also see you spell magic with a K. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. But that's something I've also noticed a lot of folks seem to have started using that. As far as I know, the first time K was used was by Aleister Crowley, and he was trying to make a separation between stage magic and spiritual magic. But before that, I don't know of anyone who used to use a K on the end of it. Now it's become very popular today, but I always found it interesting. I personally have always just put magic without the K. But again, it just comes down to personal preference. But I also consider performance art magic to be a form of actual magic too. But yeah, what tradition does that come from, out of curiosity? Where'd you learn about the interactions or the invocations that you've learned? Hey Tara, good to see you. Greetings from Niagara area, Canada. I actually don't know how to pronounce where you're from, but greetings and welcome. Good to see you. I figured I would do a random live. Kind of been prattling on, talking about resources again. That's like my big thing lately, is trying to find things. I am gonna need to turn my fan back on. Wow, it got hot quick in here. Trying to find resources. By the way, let me know if the fan's too loud. I might have to suffer through it if it's too loud in the background. I can also turn down the sensitivity on my microphone. Just keep it closer to my face. Let's see. Yeah, it does look like it's getting picked up. So let me turn down the sensitivity. Okay, that's not picking it up now. A little higher. Yeah, let me keep it down to about here. Let me know how the voice volume is and stuff. Niagara Falls is about 20-ish minutes. As far as from where you're from? Yeah, I don't know Canada. I'm not actually from Canada. I'm from the USA, so south of you. I got coursework from Mastering Evocation from Becoming a Living God. Coursework from Mastering Evocation. Is that the title of the book? Oh, becomingaliving.god.com. Yeah, I've never heard of this place. Interesting. I'll show you how to evoke angels and demons to full experience and command your godlike omnipotence. See, again, I see stuff like that, and my first reaction is like, okay, but where does this come from? Is this someone just sharing with you their own experiences? Are they sharing what they've come across, or is this something that's been passed down? And I don't think there's anything wrong with creating your own path. I think that's actually the healthiest thing folks can do. What I do find wrong is when people don't share where it's from. That's my biggest gripe of all. I'm all about helping others to look at what I'm looking at and question my resources. You know, if you have better resources, or if you think my resources are questionable or inaccurate, let me know. We'll have a chat about it. About 30 minutes from Buffalo, New York border. I gotcha. Okay. Nice. How's the weather up there? So what led you to that path, Brent? This is an open chat, by the way, open conversation. Feel free to jump in, ask questions, share your thoughts. No direct direction. I started out rambling about the 5 elements and the fact that a lot of paths, from what I've observed, have a tendency to just regurgitate information they've heard elsewhere, or they draw from other paths and make it their own. My dad was into Do you? Interesting. So your parents introduced you to it. Hey, heathen hillbilly. Welcome. How you doing, man? Lurking is fine. Lurking is always welcome. I got inspired by that recent chat that was happening in the Web of Weird. And I was like, let's have a serious conversation about this. And I was like, I haven't done a video in a while on my YouTube channel. And I'm thinking of doing a video where I dig in further into like elemental magic. But then I was like, just drawn into the conversation. The person in that group said that they were practicing for 40 years. That's longer than I've been alive. So it's interesting to see perspective from folks who, when they started out, there was no internet. There was no searching or verifying. Most of the stuff that I have done with searching and researching for some of the Scandinavian traditions have been recent because we didn't have sources available when we were younger. Or at least I didn't back in the 90s and stuff. Pagan Coffee Talk. Hi. Hey, good to see ya. How's it going? I remember reviewing one of your videos that you requested that I reviewed. So I still like and I still quote what you had said about it's interesting talking about a roast and cutting off the ends of the roast, and that this one daughter was cooking it that way, and she was asked why she does it, and they're like, well, that's just how you do it. And they eventually decided to ask their mom and their grandma, and their mom was the same reason, that's just the way you do it. And the grandma said it's because it didn't fit in the pan. And it's like a tradition that people do, and that analogy held so true. I love using that analogy. I repeat it. I learned it from your one video that I reviewed that you had done on your Pagan Coffee Talk. And that was you, right? Unless I'm missing the name, but I think you were the one that I reviewed the video for. If I'm wrong, never mind. If it is you, awesome. And if it's not you, sorry, I got you mixed with someone else. Okay, it is you. Okay, cool. Yeah, no, it stood out to me because I absolutely love it. And that's that's been my biggest complaint lately, is where people, they just repeat it and they don't know why. And then when I track down information, I want to like just share it with everyone. And it's not that, I find it weird that people try to lord information over other people because it's all there for all of us. We can all make up our own mind. And I think that's my goal of my channel anymore. When I've been sharing resources and stuff, like the last video I did was on Apple Magic, and I talked about some of the stuff that's shared, and I talked about some of the places I read the stuff, showed you a few of the books that I found the information I had. But I'm starting to question even some of those sources because it's like, where did that come from? One of the ones I've been talking about a lot lately is, where's the book? Where's the book? There it is. Icelandic Magic by Stephen Flowers. 1 second. Ugh. And I know I've done other videos on this before. So he's got the Aegis Yalmer on the front cover. We can talk about that later. But I specifically want to talk about a symbol called the Vigvisir that everyone keeps drawing, but it's not the full symbol. And it drives me nuts. And it's like Stephen Flowers made a mistake. Here we go, right here. The Wayfinder, Vigvisir. That is not Vigvisir. Vigvisir comes to us from the Hold manuscript, written in Iceland in 1860 by Geir Vigfusson. And he copied half the symbol down. Now everybody today draws it that way. And it reminds me of that roast story so much. What would be the best way to bring this up? Let's do it this way. So there is a link, guldastaffer.org, and you can get PDFs of the original stuff. G, you might like this. And we actually might have talked about it before. There's a place in Iceland, though, where you can actually get the books. PDF versions of the books. Let's see, Control-Shift-B, hide my personal tabs. Cool. Let's see, add a screen here. Window capture, maybe? And then let's see if I capture Hold manuscript, Chrome. Ah, here we go, here we go. Okay, so this is a... There we go. Okay, so this is the Hold manuscript. The website's available. So let's scroll down here. Bear with me. Bear with me. There's a lot in this. This book was written in 1860 by Geir Vigvason. So a lot of people will try to say, like, the Vigvisir is a Viking symbol. Well, it's not possible because it was written after the Viking era. And I challenge people, find me one reference to it. Here you go. Find me one reference to it where it's the whole symbol like this. And I could probably zoom in a little bit here, make it a little bit easier. So here's the thing. This top part is called Vigvisir. And this is the image that I just showed you in that book up here at the top. But down here at the bottom, this is the second half of Vigvisir. Nobody draws it. Now, here's the interesting thing. People are like, oh, well, they just forgot to put a Roman numeral in a name. I don't think they did. Because if you see the text on the side here, and if you combine the text on both sides, it's the full saying of how you use Vigvisir. So if you don't have this bottom part, you don't actually have Vigvisir. So number XX1X and XXV11, you know, this is, you know, this would be 27, and then this would be 29, right? So 27, and then this is 28, and then that's 29. So technically you can be like, well, you know, maybe it was intentional because the next time when you go to 30 down here, it's separate. So it does jump back and forth, so I could see that argument. But again, why is the script written on both sides? Why would it not be both symbols together? And then you can also use this reference here. This guy, I think it's this one. It's a translation. And again, this is where you have to trust people. So this is, again, the whole manuscript. This is a paper, usarchive.org. And this is written by, let's see, modern transcription by Justin Foster. And this is from 2015. Now, what he suggests when you go down to the whole manuscript page, when he's analyzing it, right here, let me zoom in a little bit for you. So he makes the claim here that it is Vigvisir, right here, and it is 27 and 29, because this text in its entirety is the text that they use. So if I do like Google Translate, right? So here's Google Translate. And if I take this text and I copy it over here into Google Translate, and we translate from Icelandic to English because Geir Vigvason was an Icelander, again, 1860. If you wear these letters, you will not get lost in storms or bad weather, even if a stranger sees you. So if you take away half of it, it doesn't work. So you have to have the whole inscription on both sides of this, which again, run parallel to both symbols. So if it's running parallel to both symbols, and there's no name with the symbol down here, to me, this makes sense to be part of Vigvisir. But that's the type of stuff that I want to look at and discuss. And for whatever reason, people don't do that, and they just repeat. And nobody knows why they're repeating it. They don't know why it's being used, or if it's accurate, or how it's accurate, and they just regurgitate it all the time. Anyway, I know I've done that before, so anyone who's seen that before, I'm sorry. But it's like, I love these books, but just because it's written down doesn't make it trustworthy. By the way, that's Stephen Flowers' book, Practices, Secrets of the Northern Grimoires, Stephen E. Flowers, PhD. So even though he has a PhD and stuff, it's like, is that really accurate? Can we really trust that? Minus the bottom half. Oh yeah, minus the, yes! CG knows what I'm talking about. So I've complained about this before. I will always complain about it. And it's not just Vigvisir, Egishjalmur. We can say the same thing because Egishjalmur first appears in the story where Sigurd is fighting Fafnir. Fafnir was a dwarf who transformed into a dreki, dragon. And when he was slain in his treasure hoard, they found the Helm of Awe. And they describe it more like a helmet that you wear. And then there's been different depictions of Egishjalmur throughout the years until you eventually get into the... I don't think it's the whole manuscript. It's another one, but it's like still like maybe 15th century at earliest for the modern version of Egishjalmur that we see. And in the books where it says how to use Egishjalmur, it specifically says it has to be in lead and put on the forehead, and it causes fear in your enemies. So when people get it tattooed on themselves, it's not doing anything because you're not wearing it on your forehead and it's not out of lead. So it's like things like that. It's like, how can you trust a lot of this stuff if they're just going to put up random stuff? Let me get caught up in chat. I apologize for the delay. I practiced Wicca for about 20 years, had crisis of faith and closed myself off from it for about 8 years now, and now back to the witchcraft, but not the doctrine and religion aspect of the Wicca. Feels good. You know, and that's the thing that I think is important for people to do, is make their own path. Do what works for you. It doesn't matter if you've been practicing your religion, your faith for 1 month, or if you've been doing it for 30 years, 60 years. It doesn't matter. It's your path, and if it feels right, do it. That's what I say. I mean, obviously, I advise people against harming other people. Don't harm other people. Don't harm yourself. But as long as you're not harming other people or yourself, practice what feels right to you, which is an interesting topic in itself, because some people believe that if you're not following a particular spirituality, you are in fact harming yourself by following a false path. But I think that's judgmental in my opinion. By the way, can anyone hear the fan, and is my voice level okay? I don't want to be too close to the microphone, but I want you to be able to hear what I'm saying. The Department of Defense, DoD, only though the Army looks to verify weapons use, but here avoids spirits interacting with organ functioning. So you're saying that they don't use, so they'll work on weapons, but not spiritual weapons? Is that what you're saying? Or they are doing research on it, or they're not? Lost me a little bit there. PDFs of the whole manuscript? Nice. Yes. And it's not just the whole manuscript. If you go to galderstaffer.org, they have a lot of the old Icelandic books that they're now sharing. I actually found out that Nalbraker, I'm checking my notes because, again, it's like if you can't memorize it, don't mistell people. Look at your notes. Now, Nalbrokarstaffer, which the necropants, completely fabrication, complete fiction. They made it up for the museum in Iceland to kind of do. It was like a local horror story type of a deal. It was like folklore, but there's no actual proof that that ever happened or existed. Very creepy and weird story, though, that's for sure. I find your info on the Icelandic tradition that you share fascinating. Thank you. My mom was born in Iceland. I actually have been trying to teach myself Icelandic because I still have family there, and I find it refreshing that we now finally have the ability to access a lot of the stories, which were not accessible when I was younger. So I've studied, like, I started out looking at witchcraft and Wicca. It didn't really resonate with me. The biggest problem I have with witchcraft is nobody can tell me what witchcraft is. And if you practice witchcraft, I'm open to you telling me what it is, because people seem to use it generically for the term magic. So why call yourself a witch? Why not just call yourself a magician? Now, here's the thing. I think culture and tradition plays a huge factor in what names you use or what practices that you try to do. And as I'd mentioned earlier in the video, I know you probably weren't here for this, a lot of traditions take from other traditions and then don't give honor or homage to where it came from. They just, this is what you do. This is, you know, like, and I'm not picking on Wiccans, but I heard it a lot growing up in the 90s. Wiccan tarot, Wiccan runes, Wiccan this. And these are literally traditions and practices from other cultures, and they're claiming them. Witchcraft is interesting because a lot of people seem to translate everything from other cultures into witchcraft. If you take, for example, if you take Seidr, which is, it's a type of practice from Scandinavia, and we actually don't know what they used to do. We have some writings about what they might have done. It was a feminine practice, so it would have been typically practiced by a Seithkona, which is a woman who practices Seidr, or it would have been practiced by a Volva, which basically is like translates to seer. But people will take that Seidr and they'll translate it to mean magic or witchcraft. But then there's a whole bunch of other different Scandinavian practices too. You have Goldr, you have Taufr, and it's like Taufr is like creating amulets and talismans, but we don't know how they did it. They just mention it. So it's like, how much is actually right? Then you have Fjolkingi, which is much knowing, which is another way of saying magic or sorcery. Then you have like the Goldr itself is like chanting or voicing, and we don't know what they used for those sounds when they were doing their voicing for their spells. Seidr seemed to be a performance of some form that would either work with the weaves of fate or influence them, and typically a Seithkona or Volva would have like 2 women attendants that would do a ritualistic performance and dance with it, but again, we don't know what those dances were. So it's like, when you translate, you lose meaning. One of the oldest books ever found on witchcraft is from the late 1800s. It's called The Book of Aradia, or The Gospel of Witches. That's actually what the title says. You can look it up. And it is on Internet Archive, so you can get a free version and read the PDF. I have a physical version. I think I put it up. Yeah, I don't think it's next to me. Yeah, no, it's right here. It's right here. Now, the interesting thing about this is they go into great detail on Teach You Spells. It's in Italian. Talks about the goddess Diana. That's right. Talk about Rome. That means that this is not witchcraft. They translate it to witchcraft, but Diana is a Roman goddess, which means streghiera. Does not mean witchcraft, even with the stuff in Italian. But everyone wants to say this is how you do witchcraft, and they use a lot of the different type of stuff in here. Not everything. There's some stuff in here that would probably make people shrink away from wanting to practice witchcraft. And it also tells me why Christians call witchcraft evil, if you ever read this book, because there are actual prayers to Satan, and they actually say Aradia is apparently Satan's daughter. I think either Aradia is Satan's daughter, or Aradia had a witch who was the daughter. No, yeah, Aradia is Diana and Satan's daughter, and Satan is, or maybe it's not Satan. Maybe it's Lucifer. It's Lucifer or Satan. I can't remember. I read this a while ago. But yeah, it's like interesting, and they give you the spell in Italian, and then they translate it into English for you, which is pretty wild. It's a wild book, and it's definitely eye-opening. But this is by Charles Godfrey Leland, and they translate it to witchcraft. So again, witchcraft itself, nobody can tell them what it means, because it seems to be a generic word for just magic in general. So it's like, so what tradition is it really, are the practices that you're trying to do? Sorry, I go off on tangents. Tangents. Bah. But yes, Icelandic. I am trying to learn Icelandic. Jeg taler bara smolvis islandskul. And jeg taler ekki vel. I speak a little Icelandic, but I don't speak it well. Jeg bandarískur. I'm an American. Little stuff. Hvað sertu? How are you? Jeg ser gott. No, ort gott. It's very hard to say some of the letters and pronunciations, because a lot of the sounds we don't actually have in English. So, but I'm practicing, trying to get better. But I want to read all of the original, because I feel like you lose stuff in the translation. So I'd love to read the whole manuscript in Icelandic and read it myself and translate it myself. I think that'd be awesome. Or read the original sagas and eddas. It's because, like I said, when you translate stuff, you lose meaning. I mean, how is this witchcraft if it's Italian? Because witchcraft itself, the word itself, comes from witcha, which is an old Anglo-Saxon word, Middle English word. Witchcraft, or I don't speak Old English, but it's basically like you can look it up. Etymology, look up the word witchcraft. It's from Old English. So all the traditions from witchcraft should technically be English traditions. So if you're doing stuff outside of the English traditions, then are you really doing witchcraft? I'm not telling you you're not, but something to consider, something to think about. I enjoy your fascination with traditions. Thank you. Yeah, I just... Again, I like building practice, but I want to know why and where things came from. Can you share the link? Yes, absolutely. Do you want the link to the whole manuscript? Did my live stop? Oh, no, it's just really far behind on the view over here. Yes, I can share that link with you. 1 second, please. Sorry. Try and get caught up on all the things. Hopefully you're still here. But yes, I will always share my resources. Any of them. You let me know. I will give you names. I will give you links. Whatever you want to help you in the pursuit for your own studies. So here is... I'll put this in chat. This is the link to the whole manuscript, the original. And then let me give you that translation that I was using as well. Now, the translation's more modern. It's from 2015. It's a translation someone did. But I'll give you that link as well. Here's the translation. So, again, take into consideration. Just because I say something or I've come to a conclusion and I give you reasons why I believe that, you don't have to buy that as fact. Do research on your own. Question anything anyone says. I constantly question myself and been going back to a lot of stuff and saying, hey, is this really true? It's very liberating to abandon dogmas and find your own way, indeed. I studied a bit on quite a few religions before I chose the path that worked for me. Know a bit about a lot, but a master of none. That's a great way to be, Tara. See, I like to think about when people back in the olden days, tribal days, you only knew what was taught to you by your parents and your community. Today we have the internet, so now we can get corrupted by foreign ideas and influenced by other thought processes when it comes to spirituality and practices. So that's why, to me, it's so important to know where things came from. Because, again, misinterpretations or people get inspired. I'll give you another example if you want one. A lot of people like to do readings with the runes. So you have many different rune sets. There's Anglo-Saxon runes, there's the Elder Futhark, there's a Younger Futhark, and there's more rune systems than that. I think there's like 5 or 6 in the world at least. But the ones I know about, of course, are the Elder Futhark and the Younger Futhark. People today use the Elder Futhark and they do readings. They do stone pools. The Elder Futhark are not from the Viking era, and people think that they are. Reading the runes is not how they were used. That's how we use them today. That's how some people use them today. But that's not what they did back in the day. This is not something handed down to us, and people will argue with me. Oh, yes, they did. Actually, if you look up, so the Viking era technically began. Words are hard. The Viking era technically began with the raiding of Lindisfarne, which was like late 600s. 700 CE or so, just the beginning of the Viking era, they retired the Elder Futhark basically and replaced it with the Younger Futhark. So most people, if you look up rune stones or inscriptions or tools or name tags or anything else, the very little that was written during the Viking era was done in Younger Futhark, which is 16 runes versus the 24 in Elder Futhark. Now, how did they teach us the meaning of them if they weren't really writing? At the time, most of the things you find in the Viking era was rune stones, like big stones with script carved into them. Or you might have a tool, and it would say, so-and-so made this, or this belonged to so-and-so. Or they'd find like little name tags. And I've got some pictures I can show you later, or I can show you now, of some examples of some of the things that they shown. I went to the Viking exhibit in the museum. I think, as long as I can find these quick, I don't want to take too much time on this because I'm sure that's not why you're all here, but we're casually chatting, so maybe that is exactly why you're here. Let's see, backups from phone, sorted. Where is it at? Vikings exhibit. Hey, that's me. Took a lot of pictures from the Viking exhibit. Actually, I could probably do a video just showing all the pictures that I took at the Viking exhibit because it was awesome. Felt like connecting with my ancestors. I love it. Man, I'm still scrolling. I've got bowls and plates and axes and skulls and cups and shoes and sandals. Here we go. Well, that's one part. Here's the ice skates. That just shows the runes that they use, the Younger Futhark runes. But I wanted to show you the name tags that they found and give you an example of what they typically would find in Viking Age graves. But what I was going to say is, how do we have the meaning if we didn't really have much written down from that area? And one of the ways that we have is all of the actual printings on the meanings behind the Elder Futhark runes can be found in the Norwegian rune poem, which was written in the 15th century. Viking era technically ended with the conversion of Sweden to Christianity, and that was done in about 1200. Shortly after 1200, it was in the early 13th century. So we actually started getting writings and things written down about the Viking era by individuals like, I can see his name in my head and I can't think of it because I'm looking through these and talking at the same time. But the Eddas and sagas are written down by a specific individual. I thought I had pictures of the name things. Maybe there just wasn't a lot of stuff. Maybe there wasn't a lot of name tags. Okay. Let me scroll up just a little bit, and if I still can't find it, I'll just trust me or go look it up yourself. You can find Viking Age name tags on bags and stuff. It actually might have been one of my books. It might not have been something I saw in person. Yeah, it's probably one of my books. Yeah, yep. Nope, I'm not seeing it. Sorry, waste of time trying to find it. Didn't find it. Snorri Snorrisson. He wrote down a lot of the sagas and eddas and stuff, but it was about 200 years after the Viking era. Now, granted, his father apparently was a pagan. That's what they say. So he himself was a Christian. So was there influence? He was also a skald, poet, basically. So he would have tried to preserve it the best that he could, in my opinion. But yeah, it was after that even. You know, we're talking 13th century. Supposedly the meaning was written down, and it might and they. It's called the Norwegian Rune Poems. You can look those up as well. I've got some links to those. I can show you some links to those if you want to see those. But regardless, that's the meaning people use for meaning of the runes when they're reading runes. So it's something after the fact. So you have from 700 CE, a system of writing was stopped being used, was replaced, and then all the way up into the 13th century, and then the documents was hard to read, so they rewrote them in the 15th century. So we know for a fact they were written in the 15th century, but even if you say the 13th century, you're talking about hundreds of years later. So, something to consider. Cool. Voice is... I don't hear the fan personally. Perfect. Thank you for verifying. I turned down the sensitivity of my microphone just so it wouldn't pick up the fan, which is right next to me because I'm burning up. So thank you for confirming that. Sorry, got on late. Ramron. Hey, Ramron. Good to see you. Welcome. I don't know if you're still here, but welcome. I mostly do energy work, herbology, and natural remedies. That works? We'll have to read that one, thanks. I only know of divination references in Germania, way before Viking era. In mainland Europe, and the methods he told of did not necessarily imply anything runic. Fair. And that's the thing. If someone can find me older sources to verify it, fine. Do reading the runes work? Absolutely. You can use dice to read the runes. Did you know there's actually a way of using normal playing cards and reading like you would tarot cards? You don't need anything specific to do anything of reading. What kind of is a pet peeve of mine is folks will be like, oh, this is what the Vikings used to do. I am now a Vitki or I'm a Volva, and I'm using the runes to read because that's what my ancestors did, or that's what the Vikings did, and I'm a modern Viking. And it's like, you know, you can follow any path you want, but don't spit out bullshit. Like, be honest. Say where it comes from. If you use it and it works for you, use it. If you're inspired by things that you believe are from a time period, go for it. But don't misrepresent. I mean, obviously I can't control what people do, but I'm gonna complain about it, and I'm gonna set the record straight and say, no, that's not accurate. You might believe that, but that's not true. Do you have evidence of it? Nah, I didn't think so because it doesn't exist. And if you do, then I'll shut up and I'll be like, okay, I learned something. Thank you. I appreciate you giving me more information and something to back it up with. If you back it up and show it to me, I'll change my tune. The runes never worked for me. Pendulums are my go-to, and once in a while the tarot. Understandable. Did you know that the tarot deck actually is a game? There's actually rules for playing tarot. So it's not just for divination. Now today, most people don't even know it was a game at one time. I used a dartboard for divination at one point in my life. Again, if it works, use it. Crystal gazing, water gazing, all sorts of scrying, mirror gazing, rolling dice, flipping a coin. All of these are forms of divination, and there's nothing wrong with using any of them. You can take the English alphabet, put them on stones, and then have a reason for each of those English letters, and then throw them into a bag and pull them out. I guess they're Romanized letters, so yeah. Yes! I'll be right down. Looks like my live has to end for now. Really enjoyed talking with you all. Thank you so much for interacting with the chat. I do want to do some more lives because I like just casually chatting, and I like to have you direct the conversation too if there's something you want to talk about more. I do apologize, Brent. I did not have anything to add to your initial comments because, again, I've never worked with those before, and I've never worked that path. And if I don't know anything about it, I'm not going to lie to you. I'm going to tell you, I just don't know. I have had no exposure to it, so I really don't have any comments to add to it. Still appreciate you jumping into the chat though and sharing your thoughts regardless, and sharing, you know, your own path. So thank you one and all. And yeah, thanks so much and enjoy your evening. Absolutely. Yeah, it's time to go eat some dinner, watch some TV with the wife, and then, I don't know, maybe some more gaming for today. But this will be on my channel if you want to watch it again later. It was good to see you, Blaze, in chat. Yeah, gee, thank you. Absolutely. Great to see you again, and I'll catch you, I guess, on the forums, or feel free to message me on Discord or something. So, bye for now.